Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Changing Minds podcast season 2. This is episode 6, the emptiness of self-help. When self-help works and when it doesn't work. I know what you're thinking to yourself. You're thinking to yourself, Owen, seriously? You're a self-help author, you're writing books in the self-help space, and now you're going to tell us that self-help doesn't work. You're going to tell us that it's emptiness, or that it's empty. That it's devoid of things that can actually help people. Is that what you're going to say, Owen? Is that what you're going to say? No, it's not what I'm going to say. But I do want to talk about self-help because not all self-help is helpful. And I want to explain from my point of view in a little bit of a rant, which is obviously full of lots of education and insight, which will help to improve the quality of your life. I want to explain my thoughts on self-help. So first of all, many of you might not know, myself and a good friend of mine, Brian Colbert, the legend, great top master trainer in NLP, incredible speaker. Brian and myself wrote a book called The Cynical Optimists. And The Cynical Optimists was a book about myself and Brian talking about various different problems from a therapeutic point of view and a different way of thinking about them. So in many ways, we describe ourselves as cynical optimists because we're optimistic. We believe people can overcome their problems. We believe that things can be good, but we also are cynical enough to see that life is not as easy and as rosy as some of the positive thinking might make you think it is. So the cynical optimist was our sort of calling, our declaration to say, this is a new way of thinking. We can't just blindly ignore when things are problematic. We can't just blindly ignore circumstances that make us feel bad. We need to start to think differently about our problems. And so if you look at that, and if you look at a few years ago, I started doing a series on YouTube called Sarcastic series, which you should check out on YouTube, and you should subscribe to my YouTube channel. So the Sarcastic series is me talking about lots of different problems, like how to be a loser, how to sell less, how to get fired, how to be a poor leader, how to whine more effectively, how to be terrified in front of any audience. So it's really me teaching you how to do the opposite. And that got quite a lot of interest. People enjoyed it, and it really helped me boost or build my following on YouTube, certainly. And to me, one of the interesting things about that, a couple of years after I started that, someone connected me with or showed me the videos of J.P. Sears, who is a sort of a satirist in the self-help space. He's absolutely wonderful. I met him briefly after a gig that he did in San Diego, and he was a lovely guy. But he really is a very clever way of portraying and exploring the world of self-help in a very funny way. So I highly recommend you check out. I think it's Awaken with JP is his thing. But in it, we're doing something similar in that we're creating a sort of a parody of the self-help space. And with me doing my Sarcastic series, we're teaching people the opposite to what they should do. And with him doing the parodies that he does, it's pointing out the ridiculousness sometimes of self-help and pointing out the emptiness sometimes of self-help. Because to be quite honest with you, there's an awful lot of shit out there. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful to anyone in the industry. I do mean that to be disrespectful because I don't respect the way certain things go on in the industry. And I don't know why that sort of sounded American when I said it in that way, but apologies. Look, give me a break here. I'm living in the States. It's gonna, the accent is going to impact me, sometimes. So, sue me. Don't sue me. In America, they're huge for the litigation. They fucking love to sue everybody. Not everybody does. Again, please, this is not, yeah. Anyway, moving on. The reality is that the biggest problem I see in the self-help space is that you have a huge drive of marketing. And obviously we all do. Look, I'm promoting the shit out of the products and the services that I offer. And when I talk about the Influence School, for example, which is an incredible online training that you can get your hands on. When I talk about stuff like that, obviously I use marketing and I try to get the message out there in as best I can. And I do it in a way that again, I'm being authentic and real to who I am, but I'm still marketing it. So I'm not having a go at people that are great in terms of marketing. What I am sort of saying is that when you market something really, really well, and at the end there's nothing really behind that, that's when I have a problem. And so there's an awful lot of people out there that tend to market but don't really have any substance behind them. And that's what happens when people try to do the fast track to becoming a guru overnight. They read a couple of books, they do one training, and then all of a sudden they position themselves as a super guru. And the reality is that it takes a much longer time for you to truly, I believe, be able to learn what you need and to be able to help the people that you want to help. And so what I try to do is I try to get people to understand the importance of being able to really practice what they're teaching with them in their own life, but also using it with different people and helping a number of people before you declare yourself as a champion of the world. With The Secret, for example, The Secret is a very simple idea. It is the law of attraction. Whatever you put your mind on, you attract to it. Now, if you say to me, do I believe in The Secret? Well, it depends. Because to a degree, I mean, if you do focus on what you want, you're more likely to make it happen because your brain is putting its attention on it, and you're therefore more likely to act in a way that makes it work. And also, the belief system itself will help you make it work. So if you believe it's going to happen, it's more likely to happen as a result. But at the same time, the people that think that you just fucking imagine it and you manifest in your life, that's wrong. It's bullshit. And the problem is it's dangerous bullshit, because you can create a bunch of lazy self-helpers who go around and only think positive thoughts, and therefore when the real world hits, when real negative stuff happens, they ignore it. Or even worse, that negativity, the negative events that happen blindside them, or they feel bad about the fact that they're feeling bad. Now they feel guilty about feeling bad, and all sorts of jazz happens. So to me, it's imperative that we don't allow ourselves to reduce things down to go, oh, just think positive, or everything's just about positive thinking. There's a lot of research out there which shows that optimism has lots of advantages, but there is some research to suggest that pessimism does as well. Now, obviously, if you ask me where I stand, definitely on the optimism side. There's this research that suggests that optimists live 10 years longer. There's all sorts of different things about how good optimism is for your health, and I believe in that. That's why we're cynical optimists. But at the same time, we have to look at the fact that if we ignore the realities that are out there, if we ignore the darker side of the world, then we miss a lot of really useful information. The other thing is our expectations aren't as we expect too much with too little. In other words, so often people think that if they attend a motivational talk or they attend a course, well, that will boost their motivation. I mean, they're called motivational speakers. But one of the greatest motivational speakers of all time is a phenomenal man named Zig Ziglar. And Zig had a quote where he said, motivation is like a bath. You need to take it every day. And I think that's really important for people to understand, that it's not what you get when you go to one of these trainings. The job of Zig Ziglar or his wonderful son Tom, or any of the top speakers out there, Jim Rohn, or even when I'm speaking to an audience, our job is to inspire and hopefully to educate people with certain strategies they can use, but primarily to inspire them to make the shift. But it's down to you. Like even listening to this podcast, it's down to you what you decide to do. I can give you lots of great information and even take the influence school. When I talk about that, the reality is if you buy it and you don't plan on watching it, then it's a terrible purchase. Do you know? Because if you're not using the stuff that you're investing in, then that's the biggest waste of all. And it's not that the stuff isn't working for you, it's that you're not working for you. And so that's the real problem with self-help. When, number one, when we promise something when we haven't got anything to actually give them. We, I suppose, hide behind all of this marketing. And at the end of the day, we've basic things like think positive, be positive, all these positive, happy quotes that don't get you thinking. And that's what I try to do with the quotes that I put out there. I'm trying to get people to think or look at things differently or laugh. But I don't want people to live in this world where you think an empty quote will solve your problems, because it won't. And oftentimes it'll make things even worse. Now, some people will argue about the term self-help versus personal growth. And they'll say, well, self-help is not a good title because it implies there's something wrong with you. And personal growth is, well, we can grow in our personal lives. Or even self-improvement is better than self-help. And I wouldn't disagree with any of that. But in all of these different areas, whether you call it self-help or self-improvement, which is usually used interchangeably, you're saying, I need something to be able to help me to improve. Now, Mark Manson, who's the author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck and Everything is Fucked. Mark, to me, is an excellent writer. To me, is a modern-day philosopher, really, in many ways. I don't agree with everything he says, but he makes a lot of good points. And when he talks about self-help, his issue with it is he's a multitude of issues with self-help. One of the things he says is it creates unrealistic expectations, and therefore people become more disappointed. He says self-help is often used as a distraction from the everyday world. And I've seen that myself. When you go on a course and you see people going to the same thing over and over again, they're like course junkies because they're using that because they feel so good in a course. They feel so much better than they do in their real life. Instead of taking the wisdom or guidance that they get in the training and applying it back to their everyday life, which is important. But again, it's a distraction for some people. Another thing is people tend to experience more shame with regards to self-help because they feel, ultimately speaking, they're not good enough. They feel, I'm not enough, therefore I need this stuff. So the very fact of you looking into self-improvement or looking into self-help, the argument could be made that it, by the very nature of you doing that, it presupposes that you do need help, that you're not enough, that you're not good enough. And again, that's another issue that he puts in. And he also talks about the lack of a lot of scientific validation for some of the work. Now, while that might be true, we then have a question that, to me, it's looking at the difference between, is it better to believe that you're good enough no matter what, or believe that you're not good enough? Now, a lot of people would lean in the former and say it's much better to believe that you're good enough. But I think you have to ask in what way. And the reason I say that is, if I think I'm good enough, in many ways that might give me carte blanche to do whatever it is that I want to do. In other words, if I think I'm good enough, I can be as selfish as I want. And a lot of times this whole notion of self-care, which I think is wonderful, which I think people need, but sometimes people hijack self-care in order to make the excuse that says, well, it's self-care. And really what it is, it's selfish. And so to me, we have to manage that. We have to be aware of what is self-care, what is selfishness, and the fact that there's a boundary between those things. The fact that there's a line that we cross when we go from one to the other. And so what I really ask you to think about or consider is, when you say I'm good enough, does that imply that you don't need to do anything? Because if it does, then the danger is that you won't experience growth. And so to me, the other side is problematic as well, because if you turn around saying I'm not good enough, then that's a psychological mindset or a set of beliefs that you have about yourself. That means you'll always be locked into that particular way of thinking, which means that you're continuously reinforcing the belief that there's something wrong with you. So let me try to put it all together from my take in terms of emptiness of self-help. There is nothing wrong with you, but there may be something wrong with the way in which you create feelings. There may be something wrong with the way in which you think. There may be something wrong with the way in which you act or behave. I certainly know there's something wrong with the way in which I think sometimes. Certain things wrong with the way in which I feel sometimes. Certain things wrong with the way I act sometimes. And I'm aware of that. And so as I go through the journey of life, I want to improve, I want to grow. So I want to work on the way I think, I want to work on the way I feel, I want to work on the way I communicate, I want to work on the way I act, I want to work on my habits, I want to work on the way I speak, I want to work on all of the skills that I want to develop. Why? Because I believe that as I do that, not only do I have the chance to improve the quality of my life, but also I feel that I'm improving the quality of myself. And so I ask you to not get caught up in, am I good enough versus not? I am good enough, you're good enough. But maybe the way you're thinking or feeling or communicating or acting or behaving isn't. And that's when you need to start to be aware of that and make the necessary adjustments so you can change it. So self-help can be empty or it can be full. Whether you call it self-help or self-improvement or personal growth, whatever your term is, whatever way you think about it, the reality is that the reason that I do the work that I do is I'm trying to help people to do two things: improve the way they communicate with themselves and improve the way they communicate with other people. When I say improve the way you communicate with yourself, it means getting yourself to the point that you're more effective at what you do and you're performing at a higher level, that you're speaking better to yourself, that you're putting yourself in the best state possible. And when I say communicating or influencing other people better, I'm talking about your ability to be able to make more of an impact on more people, to get more people to say yes. And so what I hope you do is I hope you can take this idea, this insight, and to really start to make sure that when you look at it, you realize some self-help might be inspirational, some might be instructional. But I want you to take whatever inspiration you can get and take whatever instructions you can get, experiment in your own life, and look to improve, not because you have to or not because you're not enough, but because pushing yourself to continuously evolve and become better and become more powerful can make sure that you have a transformative life and can make you a lot happier and a lot more delighted with your life as a result of that. So I really hope that you can begin to make sure that as you move into the future, you're doing all that you can to build yourself up, to make yourself everything that you want, but at the same time to accept who you are, that you're okay, that you might not be perfect, but that's all right as well. Because I think when we accept ourselves and when we work on ourselves, we can do them. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. We can build the kind of life we want. So, I hope you found that useful. Speaking of building yourself, don't forget about Influence School, changeyourmindsacademy.com. I don't know why I said that. It just came out. Anyway, thanks very much for watching, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye for now.